But you see, I'm British.
So are these.
Lucy!
Vampires are fictional creatures that gained popularity after the release of the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. They are ancient, majestic creatures, endowed with age-old wisdom. In films, they are portrayed as charming and insidious individuals, like a serpent tempter, subjecting everyone around them to their will. But what if everything looks exactly the opposite, and not all vampires have magic to influence their victims, and many of them are typical losers that cause not horror, but hysterical laughter? Count Dracula appears to us as you have not seen him yet. Instead of a dark and terrifying bloodsucker, we are met by a funny character, always getting into ridiculous situations, and at the same time struggling to fit the image of an ancient, powerful vampire, which, by the way, he doesn't do very well. And the thing is that Dracula is played by a great comedian Leslie Nielsen, in a Mel Brooks movie. Such a comedy duo just can't resist making fun of all the stereotypes about vampires. A surprisingly beautiful, stylish and terribly funny film, perhaps the best of Mel Brooks' films. In this film, the atmosphere of vampire horror films is brilliantly maintained, and not so much the Coppola film as the Bram Stoker book is parodied, although the cliches of such horror films are ridiculed very wittily. By the way, I do not think that this film is in any way inferior to Koppolovsky. If Brooks' sense of humor hadn't been constantly involved, and if Nielsen hadn't been in the lead role, it would have been a terrifying thriller. And Brooks clearly did not skimp on the appearance of the film. Brilliantly conveyed not only the atmosphere of old London castles and Transylvanian estates, the scenery and special effects are very impressive. The film is very, very beautiful, colorful, bright. These costumes, these decorations, these castles, furniture, green lawns and blue-black sky very pleasing to the eye. And what a girl in the movie, just drooling. Amy Yosbeck, Lizette Anthony, and two gorgeous vampires. There is no need to be afraid when such beauty. One of my favorite scenes is when I'm hypnotized, trying to get my victim out of the bedroom. You can't say that there are no antics in that movie, but there are no more of them than there should be, for sure. After all those gothic, sinister and frightening films about vampires and, in fact, about Count Dracula himself, this film is like a fresh breath of air. Who would have thought that such a sad and at the same time terrifying story about a Romanian prince can be so easily transformed into a wonderful and light comedy, in which Dracula is no longer perceived as a dark and sinister character who only wants blood, a lot of blood. Before us is a ridiculous, clumsy, stupid count, who on his own poor head went to seek adventures in foggy England. The film is made with an excellent sense of humor. Do not expect that you will find a terrifying story about the adventures of a Romanian count and the progenitor of all vampires. Don't expect that the movie will have many bloody scenes or scenes in which Dracula uses his supernatural abilities to seduce young girls. We all know how sexy vampires can be. What you should hope for is that the film will make you laugh heartily. I've watched the movie many, many times. I know every moment, every scene, I know every line, but still, every time I watch it, I laugh. It is simply impossible to remain indifferent to what dialogues the characters give out. She's alive? She's Nosferatu. She's Italian? Plus to all these funny and sometimes stupid dialogues, the viewer is given to contemplate very humorous guys. Each character is funny in its own way, stupid in its own way, and ridiculous in its own way. But this is not in a bad way. On the contrary, I would say that it even creates a new sympathy for Dracula and all the other heroes. All this is done very easily, without any vulgarity and, so to speak, stupid humor, which can be very out of place. Secondly, of course, actors. I can't say that I love Leslie Nielsen, but I have to admit that in some movies, he really does fit the bill, and Dracula is just such a movie. Leslie added something of his own, something unique to the character of Dracula. He was not afraid to make it funny and awkward. He was not afraid that after this film, he may be compared with other actors who once played Dracula and those who will play him in the future. He got his own Dracula, which will be remembered for its naivety and sometimes stupidity. So is Mel Brooks, who not only acted as the film's director, but also as Abraham Van Helsing himself. And his Van Helsing is wonderful. Again, he is funny, sometimes ridiculous, but in general it turned out to be a very lively and interesting character who is worthily opposed to Dracula. The other actors are also good. Each of them brought something special to this film. Each of them did a great job to ensure that his character did not lose humor, and that we, watching this film, laughed heartily. Third, the very atmosphere of the film. It is very light and simple. You can immediately see that it has expensive special effects, which, of course, is for the best. This is not a drama where you should sit with bated breath in front of the TV. This is not a horror in which we wait every minute for Dracula to appear with his dazzling white fangs. This is a light comedy that is made for us to have a great time in front of the TV and make sure that there is nothing to fear from Dracula. He's not evil or terrible. He is ordinary, funny and clumsy. The plot parodies the plot of the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. Renfield is sent to Transylvania to Count Dracula, who hypnotizes him and turns him into his slave, after which he is sent from Transylvania to Carfax Abbey, where he begins to misbehave. His first victim is Lucy. Dracula comes to her twice. For the first time, the Count in the form of a bat flies in the window. Then, on the advice of Professor Van Helsing, they put it in another room and cover it with garlic. Dracula frees Renfield and instructs him to remove the garlic, but it is discovered. As a result, Dracula himself, using hypnosis, forces the girl to come out and kills her. Then he decided to do the same with Mina. Meanwhile, Lucy is resurrected, and begins to live the life of a vampire. Fortunately, the professor and Harker kill her. That same night, Dracula carries out his insidious plan. After a long and painful debrief, the Count steals Mina, then bites her. In the morning, Van Helsing finds a bite on Mina's neck. The professor suggests a ball and sets up a duel in Old English words with the Count. At the ball, they suddenly open the mirror and realize that Dracula is a vampire. The Count runs with Mina to an abandoned chapel, and he realizes that they will be looking for him in his abbey. Renfield inadvertently calls it Master. They let him go, and he runs without looking back to the chapel because this film is a parody. Renfield, unlike the original novel, is incredibly stupid. Dracula strangles him and leaves. Stewart, Harker, and Van Helsing catch up. A small battle ensues, during which the Count almost overcomes the people. Suddenly the dawn begins. The professor opens the window and forces the vampire to hide. But suddenly Renfield opens the roof hatch, trying to help the master, but kills him. Later, he collects the ashes and squeezes out a smiling face. Professor Van Helsing also completes a verbal duel with Dracula. Dracula, Dead and Loving It, a real gift for fans of parodies. How many pictures were shot on the theme of the adventures of the terrible vampire Dracula? How many versions of his immortal image were created? But the authors of this film decided to simply parody all the movie versions. A violent vampire, a sea of blood, but not at all scary, because it's just a fun parody. Smile, gentlemen. Anyone who wants to laugh heartily at the screen, we recommend watching Dracula, Dead and Loving It.